start this wonderful workshop. It's actually the first of the series of workshops we are organizing at GRONEN that we called Skill Booster. We actually are looking forward to provide a platform for colleagues to attend, but also to organize what are meant to be workshops aimed at improving our skills. Who is GRONEN? Who are we? Well, GRONEN is the group for research on organization and the natural environment. For those of you that do not know us already, we are a network of more than 300 scholars from all over the world, all working in different perspectives in terms of sustainability, circular economy from a firm's and organization standpoint. So I'm very happy as a president of GRONEN to be hosting you at this wonderful workshop. My name is Valentina De Marchi. I'm based at the University of Padova and president of the GRONEN community since 1 year. And I was really looking forward to co-organize and to host this wonderful workshop. Actually, this workshop is co-organized with QUEST, which is a European project focused on quality and effectiveness in the communication of science results. So we're really having the chance to learn what the members of this project have been developing in the last 4 years, and actually also are going to receive a gift from them out of this very great work that they have done. So, but before we are going to start with the session, let me try to share my screen to just to make a short overview of the slide of the agenda. Trying to do so. Okay, sorry, just a second. So here we are. I'm also learning a little bit of the platform. So the first session is actually going to be an introduction to communication science, and I will give the floor to introduce this session to Alessandra Fornetti, who is also going to explain us the QUEST project. Then we're going to have a session in which we're going to learn and interact and discuss with our audience, journalists, policymakers, and activists, and communication experts about how to better communicate our specific type of research results. And then the very third session is where we're going to have the chance to interact with each other. So we're going to be in small groups with speakers and experts that are going to provide us the opportunity to pose questions, interact, and learn from how to improve our specific research results. So before ending this very short introduction, let me already start with a challenge. So I would like everyone to keep note of what you think is the quote of the day. So maybe something that any of the experts says, or something that pops up in the group discussion, but something that you think is a very great quote to represent what you learned, what is important about communicating science. And so feel free, take notes, and at the end, I'm gonna ask you to share with it, but you can also share it then widely meanwhile in the social media you're going to use. And you may want to use the hashtag quote of the day and GRONEN workshop and say it louder, and also tagging the GRONEN Network, which is the official Twitter account, or you can go to the LinkedIn account of the network. So with this, I will actually stop my talk and give the floor to the project coordinator of the QUEST project, Alessandra Fornetti, that is going to introduce us to the project, but also introducing the great speakers of the first session.
Thank you, Valentina, for this very warm introduction to this very interesting workshop. As you said, my name is Alessandra Fornetti, and I am the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 project, the QUEST, that investigates what defines and supports quality in science communication. I am also Executive Director of the 10 Program on Sustainability of the Venice International University, so I have been involved both in sustainability issues and in communication for quite a long time. So QUEST is investigating quality to support the communication of science in professional and in scholars of science communication. So QUEST has been doing this with a multidisciplinary team of scholars and professionals working specifically in the fields of journalism, social media, and museums, as these are the three strands in which we have been focusing our research. Quality science communication goes hand in hand with effectiveness in engaging the public. That's why QUEST started from quality to develop a number of toolkits, such as guidelines, checklists, and podcasts, which have been designed to support effective science communication for professionals and scientists who want to engage with a broader audience. Today, we are very happy to share with you some of the outcomes of QUEST and also somehow engage you in the process that brought us to those outcomes. So I'm really thankful to GRONEN for having proposed up to shape together this workshop, and to the many QUEST partners that have accepted to be with us today, starting from Sara Davis, Hilda Mannino, and Fabiana Zollo, who are respectively a leading scholar in science communication, a scientist, and a social media researcher. They will bring you directly into the core of the workshop's topic in the next session. Also, Jacopo Pasotti, Suzanne Franks, Barbara Schofield, and Matteo Di Rosa, let me ask from QUEST project, and they will offer you their perspectives as journalists and as policy advisors. So let me really thank all of this beautiful team, and then let me just ask you to put your questions in the chat, which is here, and I will be glad to share these questions with the audience after the talks. So, Sara, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Alessandra. Does anyone know how I might share my screen to share some slides with you?
Sarah, you should click on the plus button that you see on the bottom left of your picture, and that should allow you to share the screen.
The bottom left of my video image.
Cristina, maybe you can support us. Okay, take presenter. You should see take presenter, and then you should have the opportunity to
Okay,
share.
now it's possible. Thank you. Upload a presentation. Okay. Sorry, this will take a moment because I think it needs the actual file. So I will just have to find that.
Meanwhile, we are seeing people joining from more countries, Greece, there is, I think, Russia, there is someone from Rome, from Spain. So meanwhile, I see there, we keep arriving even from the audience side.
Sarah, it's on the, you see the, on the green side.
Yes. Okay, now I see it. I hope that you see it.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you again for the invitation to be here. My role in QUEST came rather early on when we were doing some work mapping the landscape of science communication and looking at research and practice, what was going on across Europe. So in this presentation, I similarly want to kind of step out mostly from the nitty-gritty of practice and to make some arguments or some suggestions about essentially why should we care about public communication? How can we think about why it's important? How can we justify it as something which we spend our time on? How do we imagine it within wider society? So I say I want to step out and take this broader perspective. This, of course, still relates to practice. So when I am teaching science communication or giving workshops, these are some of the top tips that I talk about, and these are things that I am quite sure you will discuss in more detail later on. But things like being interactive and participatory, the importance of being relevant to your audience and knowing your audience, but also knowing your goals. This is something that is, I think, an important practical tip for designing and carrying out communication. And it's this, this point that I want to take as a starting point for this wider reflection, because if you know your immediate goals, that's also a prompt to start thinking more broadly about the purpose of science communication generally. So some of the goals that people have when they engage in public communication, these might include things like wanting to change particular behaviors, perhaps health behaviors or behaviors around sustainability or the environment. Sometimes we might want to share a sense of wonder, to let other people have access to the excitement and awe that we get from exploring the natural world. Or we might also want to encourage people to study science, to give people a sense of enthusiasm that brings them into scientific careers. So these are all quite immediate goals. Some of them may be familiar to you. What happens, though, if we step out beyond those and try and characterize the broader purposes and value of science communication to society, if we think about how we can justify this as an activity within the context of the societies that we live in? So this, oh, I'm sorry, my slides have been scrambled a little bit. So this is one thing, or this is the point at which I want to start drawing on QUEST research, because one of the things that we did in this initial landscape mapping exercise was talk to scholars and teachers of science communication about their views on the role of science communication within society. So the points that I want to bring to you now, these come from these interviews, and they also come from engagement with the science communication literature. So how did people answer this question? What is the purpose of science communication? What is its role in society? One cluster of answers, or one cluster of rationales, relates to the idea that scientists should be accountable to wider society, that they have a responsibility to communicate. So the quote on the screen says this quite clearly: much science is publicly funded. So we have a duty, a responsibility to explain how that money is spent, to share the knowledge that is produced to the people who are paying for it in terms of their taxes. So this is one rationale. Another rationale, or set of rationales, circles around the importance of science communication for democracy. So we should care about public communication because it enhances democratic debate and the correct functioning of democratic societies. So this might be about deliberation, enabling critical debate on areas of science, equipping citizens to make good choices as they vote, equipping also politicians and policymakers to engage wisely and with reference to the scientific literature and ideas in their decisions. So in this cluster of responses, science communication is important because it is part of how democratic societies should work. Another set of responses related to culture and the sense that science and technology are one of our greatest achievements. They are an aspect of our heritage, which again, it is right to share with as many people as possible. These are things that we have achieved as societies, this body of knowledge, access to the wonders of the universe. This is something that deserves to be shared so that other people can participate in this heritage and can access these experiences of awe and wonder. So this is an argument that essentially compares science and technology to art or music or other achievements of our societies. Another cluster of purposes for science communication involves the argument that science is useful to people, and also sometimes that discussion about it can be useful to scientists. So the quote, I hope you still get that on the screen, is saying that what science can bring to society is quality at the level of knowledge production that hardly any other fields of society can bring. Getting that knowledge into individual, institutional, societal decisions is important. So here, the products of scientific research, they have practical value. They can help us in making good choices about our lifestyles, our behaviors. They can help, again, politicians in making good choices. And as I suggested before, scientists can also benefit practically from public communication by getting access to a wider range of perspectives, by being able to frame their work in a public context. They can also gain from these kinds of discussions. These last two, I think I will say less about, as our time is relatively short. I just want to mention that in our interviews, scholars and teachers also talked about another form of science communication, another role of science communication, but one that they framed much less positively. So they saw a lot of contemporary science communication, universities being seen as particularly guilty with regard to this, as really just being about promotion, publicity, marketing. So trying to sell science, trying to sell an institution. So this was something that they could see played a role in society, but which they sometimes questioned the value of. Similarly, something that didn't particularly emerge in our interviews, but which is apparent in the literature, is the notion that science communication is important to society because it serves economic purposes. This might be because science communication equips a workforce who are able to engage in kind of technological industries. It might be because it recruits young people into science and technology, and they go on to work in innovation industries or similar. So here, as the quote on the screen suggests, an advanced technological society needs a constant supply of scientists to sustain its economic base. What can we do with these 6 rationales? This is a very quick summary of the way in which the people that we spoke to thought about the purpose of science communication and its role and value in the societies that we live in. One thing that I think we can take from these, as well as using them as a way of reflecting perhaps on our own practices and how they fit in with these rationales, is that many of these roles relate to the importance of democracy. So we can say that science communication is important. It's something that we should care about. It's something we should get involved in because it's important for democracy and for governing science in democratic societies. Similarly, several of the rationales relate to the moral necessity of sharing knowledge or sharing the benefits of knowledge. So if we talk about wanting to share cultural heritage, to share the instrumental value of science, to enable economic development, all of these things imply that science is useful, something that people should be able to access, and therefore engaging in science communication, giving a broad swathe of society the possibility of experiencing these things. This is the ethically correct thing to do. What this means, I think, is that we can think about our public communication actually in quite grand terms. When we carry out science communication, what we are doing, in effect, is reinforcing particular ideas about how our societies should function. We are doing it ultimately to reinforce democracy or to share public goods to as wide as possible audiences. Knowing this, thinking about this, I think can be useful because it can help us put into perspective our activities so that we can really see how valuable they are, how important they are to the societies that we live in. As I close then, I guess I just want to leave these ideas with you for discussion, both in this session and throughout the workshop as a whole. Because again, I think it's useful to know about these rationales as a way of reflecting on our own practices. So the questions I want to leave you with are, how do you see the purposes of your own public communication activities, and how do these purposes relate to wider society? Do they fall into one of these categories, several of the categories? Do you see them in different terms? Yeah, and a very broad question to finish with, what kind of society do you wish to create? What are you aiming for in terms of the ultimate role of your public communication? How do you want to build a society that can go into the future in robust ways? And how does your own public communication, how might that fit into this vision, this imagination of a shared society in the future? I just close by saying that this work has been published. The title of the paper is on the screen. And also to just acknowledge, I haven't had much time, just to acknowledge and to thank the rest of the QUEST team for their support in this work, and particularly my colleague Trina, who carried out many of the interviews. I will stop there, I think.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for your very clear introduction, and thank you for closing with some opening, actually with some putting very interesting questions, which I really think are at the basis of the current discussion of science communication, especially for scientists as are here with us today, who are somehow approaching or are engaging in science communication. And especially, I think it's very valuable, the many keywords that you have bring to the table, showing really the great mutual benefits for science and for the society, such as democracy, humanity. So I'm always very impressed by your presentation. So thank you very much. And I think I see a question from Valentina. No, she's just copying in the chat your questions. So we might open the discussion after the three speeches. So now I invite Hilda Manino to the session. So Hilda.
I'm trying to show my webcam.
So, as I mentioned in the beginning, so Hilda is a scientist as a background. She's an environmental scientist, actually, and she is the scientific coordinator of a QUEST project. So she will engage you from the point of view of communication from scientists.
Okay, I think now you can see me.
Yes.
And let me check if I can share. Oh, okay. So as Sarah's introduced, we know, I mean, it's quite broadly understood that science communication has a really important role. And also the purposes of science communication are quite clear. But what is also clear is that there are challenges in communicating for researchers. And this is something that I would like to discuss with you now. But I would also finish with something positive, so sharing some tips that we developed within the QUEST project. So on how to communicate, so how to overcome these challenges. So first of all, I would also add one question to those that Sarah's asked. That is, what challenges do you as a researcher face when you have to communicate to publics that are not your peers? So they could be the policymakers or the journalists or the general public. And I would ask you to add your answers in the chat as well. And what I can say is that we asked the same question also to in a series of workshops and focus groups that we organize within the QUEST project to other researchers that work on different topics. Thank you. Yes, we are here. Thank you, Valentina. That work on different topics. That what emerged from their answers is that there are some very structural challenges that are more related with the decision makers in the research sector, like the lack of time for this time-demanding activity that is linked to the fact that in many cases the communication to the public is not a part of the time content for researchers, and also the lack of training and capacities. So these are two challenges that the decision makers should deal with. But there are also other challenges that are really related to the communication itself, on which I would like to spend a few words. So if you can go ahead, Valentina. Okay, yes. So the first big category is the message, is linked to the message to deliver. So what researchers think is that they see a challenge in the manipulation or misinterpretation or misunderstanding of the messages that they want to deliver in communicating. This could happen by the mediators of the communication, so for instance by journalists, but also by the final users of the communication, so by the public. And there is also a risk, another challenge is the banalization of the message that the researchers want to deliver. And it's not easy to explain in simple words what is inside the research. And many times the researchers see that catastrophic messages or sensationalization of their messages are used because they are more sexy, but they are quite far from the reality at the end. And another, all these challenges are exacerbated when you are expressing yourself, not in your mother tongue issue. Valentina, please, the next. And the other big category of challenges that the researchers raised is the relation with the publics. So in many cases, you will have to deal with skepticism or distrust by the publics, or they can have their pre-built ideas, or you often are in front of people that think they are experts in your topic just because they read something on the internet. And in some cases, these people are really opponents, so it's not easy to deal with them and stick to your topic when with their question they try to bring you away. And another challenge is capturing people's attention. The next one, please. And then there are some challenges that are really topic specific. So for those of you that work on climate change, you will probably agree that there is a big challenge linked to the risk perception by the public that is not always aligned with the real risk connected to climate change. Or another big issue in science is the difficulty in communicating uncertainties. That is not just an issue for climate change, but we saw it really as really important also in the COVID communication. The next one, please. And then there are also some challenges that are really linked to the kind of media that is used for communication, like the traditional media, so the mediated media. where the researchers fear manipulation of the message by journalists, or they feel that it's really difficult to transmit the right message. And they have also to deal with the time issue, because the schedule of researchers and journalists are not aligned usually. And they also complain about preparation and attitude of the journalists, in particular of the generalist journalists, not of the science journalists. And then it's not allowed to all of the researchers to talk with the media. So in some institutions, just the high hierarchy position can do that. The next one, please. And closing with the challenges with the last, with another media, the so-called new media, the social media. So these unmediated big media that we have at disposal today. The big issues that are raised by the researchers is that it's not easy to keep and manage the interaction in terms of time and in terms of the opposers that you can find on the social media. And the researchers also talk of a lack of capacities and literacy on social media. So they do not know how to choose the social media, the right social media, what to communicate and how to communicate through them. So as we have seen, many challenges, but now again, the positive aspect is that there are some tips that we can share as QUEST project. The next one, please. In particular, we developed a toolkit for scientists with different tools inside. In the slide, and I can share them with you later, Valentina, to give access to them. Within this toolkit, we also shared some tips, so a checklist that you could use for your communication. And the first thing to check is that if you are allocating enough time for preparing your communication, because again, communicating is a demanding activity. You need time. You will need different amount of time according to the kind of communication that you want to do. So speaking in public events, or writing, or speaking with journalists, and so on. And the next tip is that you really need to spend some time to understand who your audience is. So what is their knowledge? What are also their expectations from your communication and why? And also what is the media, the characteristic of the media that you can use? And then the next, once you have these real clear in your mind, you need to decide what messages you want to deliver. And the suggestion in this case is to keep the number short, very small, because it is better to focus on a few clear messages instead of trying to say anything in just one communication. And the next one, please. And once you have clear in mind what messages you want to deliver, you have then frame the messages. So try to understand, try to decide what, if you use a story, a metaphor, a conflict, so how you can frame this message. The next one, please. And what we suggest, what is really important in this framing, is to try to link your communication, what you communicate, to current facts or events. So that keeps really the interest high. The next one. And it's even easier when you can choose. It's not always possible, but whenever you can, we suggest to choose something that you really care about, because that helps you a lot to engage people. And another key point is that you are not talking to your peers, so you cannot just use a list of facts or numbers. You need to tell stories if you want that people, that the general public, listen to you. The next one, please. And you need to explain things in a simple word. So try to avoid as much as possible the technical jargon, unless you cannot explain it. And simplify, and also check if those that are not experts can understand it. What can help you in simplification is using short sentences. So try to use short sentences, both when you write and also when you speak or you use slides, for instance. The next one, please. And then talking about the other aspects, the other challenges, those related to the audience, what you have to do is to strategically plan ways to open a dialogue with the public. Because again, something that is repeated today is that science communication is not just a transfer of knowledge, it's not lecturing. You need to dialogue with the audience, so it's a two-way experience. And you have to plan for it as much as possible. The next one. And you need to keep the attention high, but you have also to monitor the reaction of the public as much as possible. When you write, for instance, you can ask for comments or other kind of monitoring, but that's another important point. The next one, please. And you have also to think that you can meet people that are opposing to what you are saying. So you also need to set strategies to deal with skepticism or distrust. And one key aspect here is that you cannot let the confrontation grow. You have to keep the tone low, and you need to plan that in advance. The next one, please. And one very important thing, whenever you can practice your communication in advance with non-experts, so exploit your parents, your partners, your friends, whoever is available for listening or reading what you have written, to be sure that you are meeting all these points. And the last but not least, many of the research institutions today have some press or communication offices and officers, and they can be really an important resource for your communicating. So we suggest you to keep contact with them. And another thing that I want to share among what we have produced, what we have developed in QUEST are the 12 quality indicators for science communication that you can use as a reference to be sure that you are reaching your goals. So I would say that that's all from my side. So if you have any question, I will be happy to answer at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilda. I'm sure these toolkits might be very helpful for our today audience. And I just quote one comment because from Beatrice Re, she says, we as researchers sometimes are considered as belonging to another world, so the communication might be difficult. Yes, for sure, but there's a way, and for sure a communication is possible. So Hilda, do you want to add anything?
Again, I think that the dialogue here is the key. So I'm also a researcher and a scientist, so I would say that from my side, what is important is to be really open-minded when you talk to people. So just to show that you are not an alien, but they can really talk to you, and you are ready to listen also to the public.
And let me say that this kind of recommendation, let's say, and guidelines comes out from co-design sessions what we did with researchers. In QUEST, we have three topics that help us develop these tools, which are vaccines, artificial intelligence, and climate change. So we engage with researchers coming from these areas, and they were really precious in identifying barriers and challenges and developing these solutions together. This is part of the methodology of the project, which we also carried out in other fields such as journalism and social media. And so it really was very helpful for developing not only the research, but also this variety of output, such as this list of toolkits. So now I would like to invite Fabiana Zollo So Fabiana is, as I mentioned, a social media researcher. She's from the University of Ca' Foscari of Venice. And hi, Fabiana.
Hi, do you hear me? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
perfect. Please.
I'm trying to. I have to upload. Okay. So how can I show the presentation? Because I uploaded it. I don't know. Maybe I
You
can
should
do
be
this.
able to click on the plus and take presenter role.
On the plus. Okay, or I can do in this way. Let me try.
Yes, if you can share just the window of the presentation, because now we do see. Okay, great.
Yeah. So, okay, I don't see you anymore. So please interrupt me if you, I don't know if there is any problem, because now I can just see my screen with the presentation. That's fine?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so yes, I'm Fabiana Zollo from Ca' Foscari University in Venice. I am a data scientist. I work mainly with social media data and online data, and I investigate information spreading and processes online. And in the QUEST project, I was in charge of all the activities on about social media, and what we did was to try to provide and to analyze to provide an overview of science communication on social media around Europe. And then what we also did was to provide recommendations for social media and to test these recommendations in the end, so that we are sure that they work, and not only that they work, but they are something useful for practitioners and communication practitioners. So the idea of these good practices is that I have only 10 minutes today, so I won't go into lots of details. But the first thing that I want to say is that if you want to communicate on social media, what's crucial is that you have to understand how this information space works. And this is why, and these slides that I'm using here today are available on our website, on the QUEST website. This is why the first part of the slides just provides an overview of the social media landscape. And we decided to include three main characteristics of this landscape, which we believe are essential if you want to communicate in this new media channel. The first one is disintermediation. So the fact that social media differ from traditional media, like, for example, the TV or print, the radio, because of the way in which they're structured. So users on social media have play an active role in, for example, news consumption, in general, in information consumption, because they're not only, on the other side of the screen. They can not only, they're not passive users, but they can be active in choosing the content, but also in producing their own content. And so the mediation that we usually have with TV or the print, where the information before reaching the public is mediated by an expert or the editor or the journalist, this mediation is not present on social media. Maybe there are other types of mediation, but this mediation is not present, and indeed users can produce their own content. So they have an active role. And so this also means that this is something that we have to take into account, because on the other side, it also means that, of course, social media are a powerful tool for many of their users. On the other side, what's also happening is, and what we have observed is that we have lots of information sources, and some of these information sources are not reliable. So some of the content that is published is questionable. You have more possibilities, and on the other side, you can lose part of the control of the information on the information flow. And this is also why, and especially during this pandemic, we have talked a lot about misinformation and in general about the infodemic. So the excessive amount of information that circulates online, and that for example, during a health crisis, but I would say in general, especially when we have when the uncertainty on the scientific issues is very high, can generate chaos or confusion among the users. And the third aspect that we have to take in mind is that what we observe on the different social media platforms is that we can observe a very strong polarization in the way in which users interact with content. So what we see is that users tend to select content according to their worldviews, according to their pre-existing beliefs, to interact with like-minded individuals and like-minded peers, and to confine their attention to echo chambers. So these groups of polarized individuals who share a common worldview. And this is important if we want to communicate in this landscape and to understand how we can reach, for example, the different groups, the different communities. So these are the three, I would say, really crucial points that we have to take in mind. So the fact that this is a special place where we are to communicate with great potentiality, but on the other side, we also have to be sure that we are able to communicate in this information space effectively. And what I like to say is that we always think about social media focusing on the media world, but in the social media, the great aspect and the characteristic, I would say, is the social keyword. So of course it's a media channel. Of course, information is there and can spread, but on the other side, we don't have to forget that social media platforms are made by their users, and so the users do really have an important role in how information spreads, and also in how they can engage with the information that you provide. So I will skip here the details, but as I say, you can access all this. The slides are on our website and can share the slides after. So what we did in the QUEST project was that so we were focusing on quality and effectiveness. So for quality, as Hilda was mentioning before, we produced these quality indicators for science communication, and these quality indicators, which are divided into three main pillars: trustworthiness, presentation and style, and connection with society, are quality indicators that are valid in general for science communication, but we declined these quality indicators also for specifically for social media. What we also did was that in the first part of the project, we analyzed a very huge data set of social media data from public science communication accounts across Europe, across 7 different countries, for different categories of science communicators. And we analyzed this data, and we used the results from this data and combined these results with these quality indicators to develop our recommendations for quality communication on social media that on the other side is also able to engage with the users, and so to be effective in that way. So our tips, because that's how we like to call them, are so we have different kinds of tips. The first one that I mention here are the 3 T's. So whenever you are on social media, you have to take in mind three main aspects. So the type of the content that you are producing, and here I mean if you choose, for example, to use, I don't know, a text rather than a picture or a link or a video, we provide more detailed recommendations for this, and it's important to pay attention to these characteristics because they can really impact on the engagement that you can reach on the different social media platforms, and they vary according to the social media platforms. The text characteristics, so for example, if you make use of hashtags, of mentions, you use links and so on, and the time of posting, which can be really important in terms of engagement. The fourth key is the topic, and in the QUEST project, we developed specific recommendations for our 3 case studies, which are vaccines, artificial intelligence, and climate change. But again, of course, it depends on what you are communicating and what's your target in terms of communication, but also the way in which you are shaping your content on social media also depends on this. And we can observe from our data different reactions from the users according to the different topics and the different platforms. What we also provided was a final checklist that you can use to assess the quality of your communication. And so this checklist here for each of the 3 pillars that I was mentioning before is indeed showing you that how you can pay attention to trustworthiness, to the connection with society, to the presentation on social media. And we provide a list of elements that you can check to self-assess your communication, your science communication. That's it. So these results are, as I was saying, are based on co-design activities, because what we also did was then to test our recommendations for a period of 5 months and more than 20 social media accounts across Europe. They tested our recommendations. We analyzed the results. We are happy to say that our recommendations seem to work pretty well. The paper is currently under review with all the results, and this was something that we were really we wanted in the project to work together and side by side with communication practitioners, because we didn't want to develop guidelines or something, something like was coming from the academic, but was not useful or appreciated by people who are communicating in their daily lives on social media. So the fact that we co-designed these recommendations was, I think, one of the major achievements of our project. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabiana. Thank you for these very precious take-home messages. There is a question from on the chat from Katrin Heucher. She says, great overview, thanks. Do you have examples of science social media communication done well, including the social interaction following a post? My impression is that we often continue to communicate among researchers, even on social media.
Okay, so we didn't put explicit examples on the documents, but you can find the very detailed, I would say, suggestions like, I don't know, use this instead of this. So, I mean, it's a combination, in the end, it's a combination of what we also did during the testing phase. So the accounts were not, forced to apply all the recommendations. So ideally, if you follow all our recommendations, we are pretty sure that the quality is very high and that you can reach a very good engagement on social media. Of course, I have to say that you also have to take in mind that social media platforms evolve very quickly. So for sure, you also have, if you're interested in communicating on social media, you also have to be, at you have to check for example, updates on the algorithm from the platforms and what kind of content they are trying to to prefer, to push, and so on. But for sure, so the list that we provided is, I guess, pretty completed and was based, as I was saying, is data-driven. These are data-driven recommendations. So these were coming from the data that we analyzed from more than 700 accounts across Europe, and so the results in these terms are pretty solid. If you go, so since they're asking for more findings on the treaties, so on our website you can find the presentation that we're using, but very soon, and maybe Alessandra can tell us more when, you will also find all the other outputs where you can find, and the deliverables, where you can find all the documentation and what we have. So all the details about the treaties, which are not public now, but will be very soon.
Yes, in fact, as Sarah put, also the link to our questproject.eu website with the toolkits, which are all downloadable and or available already. As for the deliverables that Fabiana was mentioned, including some reports, some are already published, the ones that were carried out in the first part of the project. So some works carried out by Sarah or Fabiana herself are already there. Some others, like some recommendation on policy and incentives, will be available in a few weeks, I think, because they have to be approved by the Commission first. But we are, they will be very precious documents because they also include some how to incentivize science communication from the point of view of, for example, of research institutions, from the benefit of researchers and scientists themselves.
Yeah, and if I may also add that on the website, so the first deliverable where we produced all the analysis on social media, on science communication on social media across Europe, is already available. So if you are interested, for example, in seeing more about the results across the different countries, and also in terms, for example, of sentiment of the users involved, or the topics that are addressed, or in terms of the differences across platforms, because we analyze the Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube in the data, with the data. So this analysis is already available there. So if you want, you can find very easily them on the website.
I'll put another link here, and let me also, so Fabiana mentioned that we involved, she involved 700, you said, right, platforms, and but in any case, let me also mention that in our methodology, in the QUEST methodology, we also had a group of stakeholders which also provided us their feedbacks on this work, the research work that we were doing, and they also were involved in the validation of the toolkits and the guidelines that we were developing. Just to mention one of them is, well, two, actually. One is the CERN, because, you know, it's a very well known and a very big institution. We were, of course, very proud to have it. And the second institution that was involved as a stakeholder is Sense About Science, which one of their participants, one of their representatives, is with us today in GRONEN workshop. So I take this occasion also to thank all the stakeholders that supported us in this project. Okay, so Valentina, I think it's time to stop this first session. And we have to say goodbye to Sarah Davis. She's leaving for another meeting. Thank you, Sarah. She agreed to share her presentation. So
that was a wonderful presentation, and it's nice to see a lot of discussion coming out. Also in the chat, there is, for example, also one more question for Fabiana by Sound Ray, who's looking forward to learn about what should not be communicated, which I think is a really interesting question. And maybe, if possible, Fabiana could keep discussing and reaching out even via chat, because I'm sure more than one will be happy to learn. But thanks, Alessandra, Sara, Hilda, and again, Fabiana, for a wonderful first session. It was great to learn some tips and to know that we have more resources as GRONEN Network we can leverage thanks to this partnership we are creating with QUEST. So really great to know we can learn more. But